$84 billion. That's the estimated amount the ad industry loses to fraud every single year. Not to a single bad actor, not to one rogue exchange, to a system, a sprawling, largely invisible ecosystem of fake traffic, fake audiences, and fake results. And here's what's most remarkable. The marketers writing the checks have never had a frank conversation about it. I'm Paula Kioki, CEO of Outward Media, and this is The Fraud Files. It's a new sub-series of marketing influence where we pull back the curtain on where your media dollars actually go. My guest for the entire series is someone I consider the foremost independent authority on ad fraud research, Dr. Augustine Fou. Welcome, Dr. Fou. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Paula. Glad to be here with you.
So let's dive in. The scale of the problem. Let's start with the basics. A lot of marketers fear ad fraud and pictures someone in her basement clicking on ads. That's not really what we're talking about, is it?
Yeah, I think it started out that way, and it's kind of like from the movies and TV series that you see. It's some hacker in a basement somewhere, but it's so much more mainstream than that. And part of the reason that it's gotten so mainstream is because of the number of dollars involved in digital advertising in general. So you can think of it as a huge bucket of gold that is kind of sitting by the roadside with the top off, right? So anyone can steal from it. So why not steal from it, right? So I think the bad guys have seen that opportunity, and I'm going to put the blame squarely on programmatic exchanges and programmatic media buying, because prior to that concept of buying from an exchange, the advertisers were buying from real publishers, right? They would sit across the table from ESPN, from Condé Nast, from real publishers. And those publishers are not trying to rip them off.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if they start buying from an exchange like AppNexus, right? They say, here's $60 million, here's $100 million. Go find the sites where my ads will run, right? We don't know ahead of time where my ad's going to end up. I'm going to bid on it, right? By the billions. And so that created, for the very first time, the opportunity for large scale fraud. Because prior to that, again, if you're a hacker in a basement, in fact, Boris from Brooklyn, that was actually a real story. It wasn't made up. It was Boris from Brooklyn.
Okay.
He set up tons and tons of fake websites. If he tried to sell that to a large advertiser, P&G will say, who the heck are you? Like, why would we ever buy from you? But if you start adding those websites into an exchange and kind of hiding it amongst hundreds of other, websites, you kind of get away with it. So now for the first time, these basement hackers can sell their ad inventory to the largest of advertisers. So that's what I mean by I put the blame squarely on the concept of programmatic media buying and the concept of these programmatic ad exchanges, where there's now tens of thousands of sites and tens of thousands of mobile apps that are all eating up ad budgets, right? That's where everything went south.
So does the exchange, do they know? Are they participants sometimes?
Yeah,
Or
that's a very common question. It's
accidentally?
basically, yeah, it's to their incentive to not know or to look the other way. So years and years ago, Megan Graham, a CNBC reporter, was basically bothered that so many of her articles were plagiarized by just random sites and used to make ad revenue. So she said, let me run this experiment myself. So she set up a brand new domain. I think it was called News Today Now or something. And she
Okay.
plagiarized her own articles. And then she basically applied to 8 exchanges to see who would let her in and start running ads.
Okay.
7 of the 8 let her in. And she started getting ads from the largest of advertisers like
Wow.
Kohl's and whatever within a week. And
Wow.
only one said they wouldn't let her in. And the one was Google, because they said, well,
Wow.
they scanned the content. They said, this is 100% duplicate content. Duplicate meaning it's plagiarized. It's the same content
Mm-hmm.
as on CNBC. So they didn't let her in. So in that case, to answer your question, the exchanges know, but they don't want to know. They don't want
I
to
don't
shut it
police
down
it. They don't police
because
it.
there's so much volume, right? Their revenue depends on the volume to go. So again, that's why, it's not necessarily the hacker in the basement anymore. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
be all of these middlemen are complicit in allowing the fraud to continue because they make money from it, right? They make money on the flow that goes through their systems.
It's interesting that Google stopped it because You might not think they would pay attention, but that
Well, a
gives me a
company with
better
those
feeling
kind of
about.
resources, yeah, they better
Yeah,
be able to catch that, so simple, right? It's literally 100% plagiarized article. They should be able to catch that, right? And so should all the other ones, but
yeah.
they did.
Wow. Sounds like an opportunity for lawsuits. But anyway,
Yeah.
so basically, what we're saying is when a marketer looks at their campaign dashboard and sees strong delivery numbers, low CPMS, high CTRs, these could all be almost entirely fabricated, is what you're saying.
Yes. Unfortunately, for many, many years, the marketers are looking for large delivery numbers, right? Low CPM prices, whatever, and maybe even high click-through rates. So if those were the KPIs, digital advertising certainly met all those KPIs and beyond, right? But if you're a marketer, you shouldn't be looking at those KPIs. You should be looking at the KPI of business outcomes, right? Did you actually get more sales? Did you actually get more B2B leads? So on and so forth. And once you start looking at those, then you'll start to realize, okay, I got so many ad impressions. It wasn't even real. So, people were saying, in fact, 5 minutes ago, saying, oh, well, even if there's a little waste, it's fine. We got more reach. But my retort to that is if it's waste, it's not reach.
No, it's not.
If the ads were shown to bots, it's not actual reach.
Yeah.
So
Reach to where?
yeah, even if your numbers show you bought 1 billion impressions, if 90% of those were not shown to humans, that is not reach. That is waste. And none of those actually caused a business outcome or an advertising outcome for you.
So if we follow the money in that chain, who actually does profit from the fraud? Is it just the exchange or is there anything else in the
It's
ecosystem?
it's everybody. It's
Okay.
everybody, right? So if you think about the good old days, when advertiser bought from the publisher, when the advertiser paid, the publisher got the money, and their job was to show the ads. So using a term from TV, it's working media, right? So there might be 15% that went to the agency, but working media was close to the 100%, right? The dollar you paid mostly went to working media. That means your ads get displayed. But years and years ago, the trade associations around the world, right? The WFA, World Federation of Advertisers, the ANA, Association of National Advertisers, the ISBA, which is the British equivalent, they ran their own studies and said only 50 cents on the dollar actually got through to the publisher for working media, for actually showing your ads.
Sure.
That means at least 50 cents on the dollar went to some middleman for doing something else, not showing your ad. The problem is way worse if you take into account the fraud, right? Because if your ads are not shown to humans, then you're lucky if you got 10% of your dollar to actually be effective. So I calculated this years and years ago. It was more like 1% went to working media. Okay.
Wow.
But again, it's so hard to believe if you kind of grew up in this mindset of digital advertising. So the only thing we can really ask these marketers to do is look at your own sales and maybe run a turnoff experiment. Because I actually have a client doing that right now. When she said she turned off the digital campaign, the traffic to the website actually went down. And she turned it back on, it went back up. And then she did it a few more times just to confirm and make sure. But in those cases, keep in mind, it wasn't necessarily the clicks. It was when they were doing the ads, people saw it. They may not have clicked on the ad itself. They said, oh, yeah, I'm interested in that. And they just went to the website directly, right? So a lot of the things that marketers believe today may actually be more misleading than helpful. So it really boils down to look at your own sales, look at your own business outcomes. Those are the things you should focus on, and then see if the digital marketing, see if your TV marketing, advertising, whatever, is actually driving any kind of additional activity that then leads to a future sale.
But still, if you're having 50% waste, think about if you didn't have the 50% waste, how much more profitable or better
Exactly.
outcomes you would have.
Exactly.
Uh,
So a
so
lot of these things people just don't want to know because it's uncomfortable. It's also inconvenient because they'd have to do things a little bit differently than the way, if they've been doing it for the past 10 years.
well, you'd think somebody within a corporation would care, right? The
Yeah, and I'm
well,
actually very optimistic. I am seeing that pendulum swing back the other way. So I am seeing more people ask more questions. And it's like, okay, don't wait until your CFO steps in or your
Mhm.
CEO steps in. It's better if you look and find the problem first and you're the CMO, you
Mhm.
can fix it before your CEO comes knocking on your door.
And potentially be considered the hero.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. I'm seeing more of that, so I'm very encouraged.
That's good. So the question I always want to ask is why hasn't it been fixed? I mean, the industry has known about fraud for years. You talk about the ANA, published research, investigations, lawsuits, congressional attention. Why does it keep persisting at this scale?
So, what we talked about earlier is that everyone, almost everyone, wants it to continue. Okay, let me be more specific. All the middlemen want it to continue because they make money on the flow, on the volume that passes through their systems. The advertisers, you would think, okay, they're paying the money, they're not getting a business outcome. There's two problems. One is the verification vendors kept telling them that fraud is 1%, don't worry about it, right? Just keep spending. So they thought that fraud was low. And the second thing that's happening is more of an attribution issue. So the way the sales are attributed to the ads means that a lot of these ads are taking credit for sales and conversions that they didn't actually cause. It was correlated, meaning those sales happened at the same time as when you were running your digital campaigns, but it wasn't caused by the digital campaigns, right? So the way I usually describe it is a single display ad doesn't cause a single sale. It might have contributed to it, might have made the person aware of your product or whatever, but it doesn't cause a sale. So the way we attribute sales back to a single ad impression is flawed fundamentally and from the beginning. And so because the advertisers look at those ROAS, return on ad spend reports, and ROI reports, they think their campaigns are working because the reports are claiming credit for driving the sales that had already occurred. So both of those contribute to, again, young marketers thinking that everything's working fine. Oh, I got more impressions, more reach, lower costs, and all this ROAS happening, right? So
Mhm.
that's why they've continued. I don't really blame them. I do blame, again, the methodology of programmatic media buying, as well as the legacy verification vendors. I won't name the names, but basically their job was to protect the advertisers from this fraud. But because they've reported 1% IVT for the last 10 years straight, they basically hadn't been doing their job.
And they're out making money while they're not doing
Yeah.
it.
Billions of dollars
Mhm,
wasted over the
mhm.
years for fraud detection that did not work.
Which to me says fraudulent.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Wait till someone actually sues them for
Yeah,
selling a
yeah,
product that doesn't work.
exactly, exactly. So if you bring this down to the marketers sitting at their desk reviewing last quarter's campaign results, what should they be looking for uh, that something is missing or in the signal or something is wrong?
Yeah, I think they should focus on their own numbers, not the numbers that the platforms tell them, right? So if you're
Right.
buying from a platform like Google, right, the reporting is going to favor them, right? They're not going to say anything's wrong. They're not going to tell you 90% of it was fake. They're going to tell you everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Keep spending more, right? The ad tech companies, most of the ad tech companies are middlemen and they inserted themselves between the advertiser and the publisher. So
Mhm.
if every single one of these ad tech companies are trying to maximize their profit because they have to satisfy their VCs and show hockey stick growth, where do you think that's coming from? Right? They are extracting margin uh, on the supply path between the advertiser and the publisher. The more they extract so that they become more profitable, the less money from the advertiser goes to work in media, right? So for the past 15 years, all these ad tech companies and the big platforms like Google and Facebook that make their money on advertising have grown tremendously. And the people and the parties that were hurt were the advertiser and the publisher, the both the endpoints, right? Because all the middlemen were maximizing their own profits. So ultimately, for the CMO and the marketer and their CFO and their CEO, look at your own sales. Did your digital marketing campaigns actually drive more sales? Now, there's actually a very large longitudinal study over the past 15 years that said some of the largest public companies in the US, these are large advertisers, the ones that shifted most aggressively into digital did not grow at all. Whereas
Wow.
the ones that maintained a very healthy amount of spending in TV. And two of these you would recognize because we live here in North America.
Mhm.
Geico with the little lizard and Progressive with
Mhm.
Flow. right? They've maintained a healthy spending on TV advertising. Those are the ones that grew.
Wow.
Okay, so now obviously it's not cause and effect. There's many, many other factors that would have impacted that, but literally across 225 public U.S. companies, we can see looking at 15 years of revenue data, the ones that shifted most aggressively into digital did not grow at all.
Boy, that's disheartening, putting it mildly.
Yeah, but that's a macro trend, right? There can be advertisers that can do digital correctly, use it correctly, balance it with other channels like TV advertising, and then they can be the ones that actually surpass their peers. And I think that's what I'm hopeful of. Not everyone's going to do it. Not everyone's going to want to solve the fraud, but of the ones that do, there is a significant opportunity for them to do way, way better than their peers.
So before we close, I always like to ask this. If a CMO is listening right now, what's the one thing you'd want them to walk away with?
I would say know that there's a lot of fraud in digital because when we're talking about bits and bytes, it's very easy for bad guys, even sitting in their gaming chair at home or in their basement, to rip off the largest of brands. So it goes back to basic principles, best practices of marketing, best practices of advertising, right? Make sure you run the models that are not dependent on what the platforms tell you, but run the modeling and the models that show whether your sales lift is generated by certain campaigns. And if it's not, be very aggressive at cutting and shifting the budget to something else that is.
Lot of things to stay in mindful of.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Dr. Fu. This was our first episode of the Fraud Files. I appreciate you, and we'll see you
Thank
at
you,
the
Paula.
next episode.
See you soon.